Welcome to Openly Gamer Theater Backstage. My name is Eric Osley. This episode, I'm going to discuss Willpower Games' Synthicide. We recently released a 3-part video actual play of it, and so if you haven't watched Synthicide Paradise Found, be warned, we are going to discuss spoilers, the game, as well as the production itself. Joining me are two of the players, Chris and Michael, as well as Synthicide's designer, Dustin DePenning.
Hey,
what inspired you? Synthicide is a sci-fi game, and obviously we warned you. You should have listened to Paradise Found first, so that way you get a sense of what we're talking about. So, Dustin, what was the inspiration for this? How did this come to be?
it came to be that I loved a certain style of mechanical game and then a certain genre of fiction, and combined those two to make the game. Mechanically, I've always loved simplistic role-playing systems that then have a little bit of tactical wargaming mixed in. So I like the role-playing to be fast, quick, simple, single die resolution. Not too many complicated skill lists or anything, but once you role play through scenes and eventually get to an area of violence, I like combat to have interesting mechanical choices, again, without being too complicated. So I tried to develop the battle system to have some very specific, meaningful choices, and then develop the role play system to be really simple and bare bones, and combined that with my favorite type of fiction, which is sort of like gritty noir dystopian future stuff, and robots from like Isaac Asimov's line of books. Those are like my two favorite genres. So I basically took inspiration from Isaac Asimov's Foundation series and imagined a galaxy that fell apart where the smartest people around were incorrigibly corrupt bad guys, and they were the ones rebuilding the galaxy instead of this kind of more pure-minded group of people like in the Foundation series. And as opposed to a universe where robots serve humanity, I wanted to throw it on its side and do a universe where humans were servants to robots.
When you're talking about the war game aspect of it, just a little bit of a background. When Dustin and I first started discussing us doing this actual play, there's several different options as to way something like this could happen. And I said, would you be opposed to us doing video with like a Roll20, which is what we did? And I believe your reaction was, that's exactly what it should be, because that's the way the game should be played.
Right. You can sub in theater of the mind style play if you want when playing Synthicide, but it's meant to be visualized and square based, because it's about knowing how far away things are, and tactically managing your choices and timing to make sure you're in the right place at the right time, and able to accomplish the things you want to do to get the upper hand on the enemy.
One of the mechanics that we didn't portray correctly was the action point mechanic. So how did we portray it differently than it actually should have been?
So you were really, really close in the sense that, you have action points and you spend a certain number of points per turn to accomplish actions. The one mistake that seemed like it seemed like all of your characters were able to attack twice and do a couple more actions on their turns. And one of the core aspects of the game is attacks get harder to accomplish the more times you do them on the same turn. So your first attack is 1 point, your second attack is 2 points, your third attack is 3 points. That's just so people can't, linearly dump a million attacks in a turn and just nuke the enemy. But that was, really the only minor thing. It just seemed like everybody was able to attack twice and then do more stuff, which most people, unless they invested heavily in their speed attribute, would only be able to attack once and then do a couple other things, unless they spent their whole turn attacking and doing nothing else.
Okay.
the characters we were given to use in the game, kind of as our sample characters, how advanced were those characters as compared to someone who would create a brand new character in the system? Were we talking about characters that had been given a number of levels to be able to spend to get themselves a better base of abilities and talents and skills? Or was what we were playing more like something that I would open up the book and roll up a character, and this is what I would get?
Just by guessing and judging by what you guys did, it looks like your characters were maybe only second or third level, so not super advanced. So pretty close to first level.
Yeah, as I recall, there was a part in there where Ram wanted to access one of the jump gates, and I said, "Look, you can't do that because that's like a level 7, advanced maneuver, and you're not even close to that. I think you only had like the level 1 maneuver."
That's correct.
Yeah. And that's standard. The game only comes in 3 tiers of maneuvers. You have level 1 maneuvers that you collect and customize up until level 4. Then you have level 4 maneuvers that you collect and customize, and then you have level 7 maneuvers that you collect and customize. It's a low level game. The game maxes out at level 11 just because, with a very simple die system and 1d10, it's kind of difficult to meaningfully scale modifiers and abilities across more than 10 levels.
Have you play tested, like an extended campaign or anything like that to really stretch it that far?
Yeah, and that led to every time I would make it to a high enough level, that would lead to redesigning one or more systems. Because a lot of game systems, seem like they work really well on the front end, and then as they start scaling with level, they start to break apart. We play tested the crap out of levels 1 through 4, and then did iterative testing on the higher levels, and then ended up having to polish everything off with just raw mathematics at the end to make sure everything was completely in line with what a maximum attack score should possibly be and what a minimum attack score should be.
Being somebody who's not that lucky when it comes to rolling the dice, just curious, what inspired your twist mechanic? Because I'm the one that usually rolls that 1.
Yeah, the twist mechanic came from I liked the idea that things could go horribly wrong and surprise both the players and the game master, because the game master is the person who makes up the twist, but they do it based upon when the dice tell them to, and they make it how bad based upon what the dice say. So it's kind of a way to have some suspense on the GM side, because they don't know when they're gonna jump in and throw something at the players, and it's a way to build a sense of suspense and dread on the player side, because especially with the resolve system, where people are throwing out 10s and or frequently rolling a 10 on the die because it's a 10% chance. That's pretty easy. A lot of the players are going to feel like they're winning big and really getting ahead. And I sort of wanted this like karmic retribution where all that success could come back and bite you in the end, where you're like, doing this amazing job, and then you build up a bunch of points in the twist pool from all the 10s you roll, and then someone rolls a 1. And it's like, oh, time to find out what went wrong.
I can say as playing as Ram as I believe it was the scraphead, the scoundrel in the game. The twist mechanic was really interesting because I kept feeling like the dice were just with me that night or what, but Eric kept throwing out difficulties, and I just kept nailing it. And then finally, I think I don't know if it was Chris. I think it was you that rolled the first one.
It was.
Bite me in the butt. I should say bite us in the butt. And that was an interesting thing to see play out, because I did feel as a character like, wow, I'm really nailing this. Like, Ram is like this amazing hacker / user, and suddenly, all those successes I had to pay for. Somebody had to pay for it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a It's a gritty game, and it's the universe is out to get you, and so the twist system was one of those ways to represent that. And one of the optional rules in the game for people who really like swingy games, I don't play this way, but some people play this way, is exploding dice, where tens explode, so you can get like really, really big successes. And I pretty much tell people it's mandatory to use the twist system if you're going to use exploding tens, because there's got to be, the universe has to balance itself out.
Oh man, yeah. I mentioned that in game. I said, we could do the exploding tens, but that could get really, really crazy. Especially with using, and one of the aspects of the game that I really, really like is using the result die as your damage die, because that makes things so much faster. It's like bang, I know if I hit, and that's how much damage I do. There's no, waiting for somebody to pick their favorite 8-sider or whatever it is, and mulling over all of that. It's it's quick and clean, bang. That's how much damage I do.
Yeah, that was one of the big things about the game when I started designing it. Is I was obsessed with single roll resolution. I wanted everything in the game to be one die roll. So I liked the idea that you would just roll the 10-sided die and see if you hit, and then take that exact same result and use that to modify your damage. Because, early in the game, I actually tried to do a success lead was how much damage you dealt. Like however much you rolled above the target defense was how much damage you dealt. That was my first approach to doing a single roll solution for attack and damage. But that didn't work out in the long term. That was one of the things I redesigned at high levels, because at high levels, everybody's defenses and attacks are so different from each other. You end up with one character that can only deal like 1 to 3 damage, against enemies, and then another character that's dealing like 5 to 15 damage, minimum, or even, some characters that are dealing like 10 to 20 damage, right. So I divided the attack and damage into 2 separate instances, just so mechanically, it would be easier to, squeak by with a hit and still deal significant damage. And then I just decided, though, but you still only roll the die one time. So the 10-sided die is used both for the attack and the damage calculation, the same result. And I just liked that, not just because of the simplicity of only rolling the die one time when you take an action, but also I liked it because of how well you succeed in your attack is directly proportional to how much damage the attack does. Right. Which is something I always liked, because it would always drive me crazy in other games to succeed in an attack, by a huge margin, and then roll minimum damage on the damage dice.
Right. Yeah. That is such a bummer. It's such a letdown.
Yeah.
Chris knows.
Yes, that's my curse. One of my curses.
So, question: why 10-sider? Why not any other dice choices?
So I like linear odds. Especially when I was designing this game. I started designing this game a long time ago, and I knew a lot less about design then, but I still had some preferences. And one of the things was I wasn't as into bell curves at the time, so I didn't do multiple dice because I didn't like counting successes, so I didn't like dice pools. I just liked looking at a number, knowing how well you did. And so I decided I wanted to use a single die, but my experience with D20 games is the variance is huge. It's a little too random for my taste. And then single D6 games, I feel like there's not enough granularity when you play games that use a single 6-sided die, because everything's broken down into 15% odds, which is just a little too big chunks for me. So I decided, I could have gone with a D12, or I could have gone with something else to get, small, meaningful chunks. But I decided to go with the 10-sider just because I liked, 10% odds. It was just easy to calculate, and I liked working with that.
Sure.
just if I can cut in for a second, from a player standpoint, I enjoyed the fact that the game felt just crunchy enough. Like, I feel like there was a good mix of dice rolling and mechanical aspects to it. And then, of course, on the flip side, as a role player, I like to be able to have the freedom to kind of play the character as I imagine the character and not necessarily by the stats on the paper. And I feel like the ARC system that really gives a good balance of that.
Thank you. Yeah, it was a big goal to me. I like rules that don't really stand in the way. So that's why I tried to stay away from really long skill lists. When I designed my combat maneuvers, I tried to avoid having like 20 specific combat maneuvers for this, that, or the other. I just came down with, your basic combat maneuvers plus, that special gain advantage maneuver that allows you to role play in the middle of combat because you get to make something up and then pull off a cool effect. It was, this game was definitely designed by preference. Some people, when, they design games, they have like a target market in mind, a specific play style in mind, and, they go after those people. And for me, it was literally just designing the game I wanted to play, which was a very, very fun design exercise, but not necessarily good to make money, because it's a very specific audience I'm going for, and that's people who like the same games I do. And I like games that are just crunchy enough to give you structure, but not so crunchy that you feel like you have to look up a rule every 5 minutes.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And from my perspective, Synthicide is like the perfect con game because the barrier to entry is not very high. You can sit down, you can have your character sheet right there. The character sheet is very well organized, so you can run this at a con, and you don't have to do a whole lot of teaching. It's just get in, start playing, and the setting, that's probably what you have to go over more than you do the mechanics.
Yeah, that's actually exactly what I run into. Since it's not a generic fantasy setting, when I run Synthicide at cons, the majority of questions are like, does this exist? Does that exist? Like, what does X mean? What does Y mean? Like, how smart are robots really? Those are like the sorts of questions I get are really like setting specific and much less about the mechanics, because people tend to get the mechanics pretty quickly, especially if I have a printout of the attack actions sitting in front of them, because that's like the hardest part of the game is the attack actions, and everything else is just roll a die and see if you succeed.
Since you're talking about the setting, why did you choose to make the synth so important?
That was just having fun poking at the heroes. I played a lot of high fantasy games where the heroes were better than everybody, and like in a league of their own, and then I found players tended to behave like shameless murder hobos despite having every advantage in the world. And I kind of felt like, well, if you're going to be murder hobos, I might as well put you in a universe where it makes sense that you're murder hobos. You're starving half the time. You're surrounded by violence, and your life doesn't mean anything because murder isn't even actually a crime except if you kill robots. But, the whole murder hobo consequence is, robots are worth a lot of money to kill. So that's kind of the tension that players go through is, trying to cut a name for themselves in the universe and, carve out their space where they can feel safe and resourced and breathe, and then having to butt up against, the tech cult and the robots and, realize that even though, they can get away with most crimes, there are still some borders that are dangerous to cross.
I like how it's like the moralities flipped. It's okay to do whatever you want, but just don't kill robots, which most players and whatnot wouldn't think twice. I mean, think of other sci-fi games where you have a robot or an android or something like that, and they're just they're battle robots. I'm going to hack through them and just wade through them, and I'm not even going to care. and that whole morality gets flipped. So, and players are going to be more apt to be sympathetic to a meat person than they are a synthetic person. And so now they have to think, wait a minute, do I want to risk the consequences of doing that?
Yeah, that was just part of painting the universe in a more, hostile light. The fact that everything's upside down. So, your own life doesn't really matter, and the type of life that matters to you least is the one type of life that's considered sacred and protected.
Michael, did you have any more questions?
Actually, I do. Like, what, Dustin, if you don't mind, can you speak to the difficulty of balancing the play style in the game? And when I say balancing the play style, I mean, you've got a game here that, you've described as a very gritty, very like hostile, negative world. Yet the playthrough that we did was really more of a Star Trek vein than like a Blade Runner vein or like a Dark Asimov vein, right? I feel like the system worked very well for us to do that, but I don't feel like we necessarily touched on some of those the challenges that you're putting in front of a player in this hostile world environment versus what we played through, which was felt very much more like classic sci-fi, classic Star Trek, like morality-based scenario.
Right. Well, it's all in there though. Like the stuff the stuff you guys did is not completely out of the realm of the game. It's just I like when I make a campaign universe or a game universe, I like seeding it with different types of hooks that could appeal to different people and different play styles. And the core of the game, the intro adventure that's for free up on DriveThruRPG focuses on the core of the game, and that's that you guys are dirty criminals that are scraping by and might have to kill a robot or a priest to make enough money to eat and jump to the next planet. And, those are the core themes. But, one of the things that's interesting is, if the universe is so dark and so horrible, wouldn't people be out there looking for something better? Wouldn't people be trying to find a better place to live? So I have in the rules, there's this place on the map called the Outside, which is where you guys were hanging out. It's this, unexplored region of the galaxy. And then in that little section where it explains what the Outside is, it mentions that if anybody, finds a way to venture in this area, they're looking for like mythic Shangri-Las. They're looking for, magical places that are much better than what they have access to. So, it's a small theme that you guys explored, but it is still a theme that's part of the game and part of the game universe.
Very good. And it's actually funny because at the same time we were playing this, I was involved in a private playtest of another game that's upcoming that's based on that exact, property of the Roddenberry and Paramount groups. And I have to say that like our game felt more in that vein than the playtest I played. Like a lot of the themes, a lot of the interactions we had with the people in the world. And again, this is kind of specific to our group, our adventure. But I feel like those themes were much easier to hit upon in this game versus the other one I'm playing that feels a lot more mechanical and stat-based and less alive.
Yeah. I kind of feel like the longer your skill list is, the less narrative control you have. And everyone having complete narrative control means that everyone's fighting with each other and it's difficult to suss out the actual story. So, you need to limit people's narrative control to some extent. But, there's a gradient of how much you limit it, and it's always good to limit it, to the minimum amount. So that's why I went with a attributes as skill design methodology where there's 7 attributes, and basically everything in the game is one of those 7 attributes. So I guess it's sort of similar to Fate in that way, or Fate Accelerated rather, where you just boil it down to, well, I'm, doing X and it feels like it applies to this attribute. I'd say the only area of the game where I kind of broke that design methodology is with operation, because when you're dealing with a hard sci-fi game, you need technical knowledge of some type. So I devised that knowledge system where it's basically assumed your characters are uneducated pieces of crap and don't know how to do anything technical. But if you have a specific power that says you know how to hack computers or you know how to fix spaceships or something like that, then you have access to that, and then you use your operation stat to activate those abilities. A lot of people they find that Synthicide, since it's really stripped down, really basic roleplay system, I always say it's like a slight mix between OSR and Fate. They find that they can, tell the types of stories they want, and they focus on the story they're telling. And then the only part of the game that's, codified is, beyond that is the battle system. And that's just my own personal taste because I like tactical wargaming. So I made the battle system tactical just, so that way I could, have some more crunch, throughout the session. But it kind of creates that ebb and flow where, battles are, structured and tactical, and you gotta, make relevant choices and think about what you're doing. But then once the battle's over, everything else is a little more free form and easier to adjudicate.
Yeah, talking about the operation, there was a point, and it was Michael's like, am I going to roll operation again? It was just like an operation roll, and it got right about the midpoint of the adventure is when I started changing things so he would roll different stuff, and he was like, oh no, because it was like he was very heavily operation.
Where did all these failures come from?
But talking about the combat system, I love the combat system, like I said before, with the damage and things like that. And Caleb, who can't join us for this discussion, his character was the meat shield, and he was getting messed up. And what really kind of brought that to the forefront was the healing rules are very strict, at least from my perspective. If you don't have somebody who's trained in healing, and correct me if I'm wrong, there's not a whole lot you can do.
Oh yeah, that's basically it. Like, I did that on purpose just to make fighting really scary and a financial cost-benefit analysis. I didn't want people to be able to just, go run in and, slay a bunch of orcs. Buff a couple heals, sleep on it, and then take their treasure back to town. I wanted people to, feel like getting hurt mattered. And, the healing isn't that strict at the end of the day. Because, if you do have someone who knows how to heal, it's not super expensive for them to heal you. But still, it's got just a little bit more edge to it than a classic combat heavy RPG, and it makes losing hit points more painful and more scary. And that's one of the things that's funny with the game is a lot of people look at their hit points on their sheet and they're like, oh, I'm level 1 and I have 46 hit points, or I'm level 5 and I have over 60 hit points, and they're like, man, I'm really strong. And then they take that first hit and it's like 13 points of damage. They're like, oh crap, these hit points go really fast.
I just lost an arm.
Yeah, and it sets up, if your classic encounter based adventures where you might have an opening fight and then you move on to something a little bit tougher, than you headed your way towards the boss and whatnot. And I structured the adventure kind of the same way because that's relatively familiar for everybody. And it got to the point where Caleb was looking around like, I don't know if I can hang. You guys might have to, pull your weight here because I can't take much more damage. And after that first fight with the mutant, he was beginning to think, I don't know if I'll be able to continue playing. because I don't know if I can last. You know, and it makes those hard choices, because then later on, you know, you're thinking, I can't get into a fight like that again, and we might have to run. And running for player characters, it's almost like sacrilegious, but I think that it's kind of a lost art, and this game promotes that. It's, hey, don't bite off more than you can chew, because you could pay the consequence.
Yeah, and you know, some people pick up on that faster than others. Like when I play this game at cons, like sometimes it's kind of it's good and it's bad. Like I've made combat fast, fun, and engaging, but I've also made it really scary. And some people end up being so scared that they try to avoid combat as much as they can. So sometimes I'm at conventions where I barely get to demonstrate the combat system, because people, you know, have one encounter where they almost die, and then they spend the rest of the con session running away from every enemy. And it's like, well, yeah, it's pretty realistic. That's, you know, you're a bunch of, you know, criminals scraping by, and you've only got one life to live. But, you know, still I would, you know, this is a con game. I'd like to show you how cool the battle system is, but, you know, so.
I would think too, when you talk about the system where it's built basically where level 11 is like an epic character in the system, you know, if you're talking about that, you're really stretching out the leveling process at that point too, over the course of a campaign. You know, in some campaigns you could play for a few months and your character's maybe level 10 out of epic levels of 40, you know, whereas in this one you're stretching that playtime out further, because you're not just power leveling from one level to another, from one adventure to the next. You've got to like slowly build the character over time.
Well, it depends on your play style. I actually met the game. I met people to basically max out their characters in 15 to 20 sessions. Just because I felt like, you know, realistically, that's the maximum number of sessions 80% of people will play of any given game system. You know, a lot of people only play 5 sessions of any given game system, and then they give up and get tired of it and move on to, you know, to the next game system. You know, the people who stick with one game system for a full year or 2 years or 3 years, like that's really rare.
Or they're podcasters.
Yeah, or they're podcasters. Yeah, so that's both an upside and a downside of Synthicide. Is you give Synthicide 15 to 20 sessions, you see the whole game. But then that means if you like it so much that you want to play another 15 to 20 sessions, you got to start over.
Well, there's nothing wrong with that.
I just actually, on that point, what are you thinking about for expansions in the future? Are there expansions in the works, or is this a one and done, like we've built the world we want to build, we've put the system together the way we want it, put it into the void and make another one?
So I've been working on expansions. You know, I had some non-expansion stuff in the works, like, you know, different ways to engage Synthicide. There was a guy who was interested in licensing the video game rights. I don't know what was going through his mind. He's a buddy of mine, but I was like, man, there's got to be more famous things to make a video game out of. And then there was a terrain company that was thinking about making terrain. You know, those are still up in the air, but I finally made the decision, like this month actually, that I'm going to make an expansion. And the expansion I'm going to do is mostly story and equipment, because I felt like equipment was one area of the game where I left it kind of open-ended and, you know, just wrote the bare minimum amount of equipment needed to do what you want to do. And I didn't have, you know, a lot of the more advanced, you know, some people are gear nuts and really love, you know, tweaking their loadout and, you know, finding creative and clever ways to combine this effect with that effect. So, and then, you know, the story of the game universe is pretty light also. You know, it's the majority of everything about the game universe is down to like, I think it's like 35 pages, I think, is all the setting information. and there's a lot of empty holes left specifically for the players and the GMs to fill in. They can decide what this piece of the universe is, and they can decide what this part of the story is. But that means there's a lot of room to write new content. So what I'm going to do is I have a friend who makes comics, so we're going to make a 40-page comic, and then we're going to couple that comic with. I'm thinking about, this is all prelim, I'm thinking about calling it the Galactic Folio, and it's just a collection of stories and small additional rule sets, and the comic is a standalone story. And then you have probably, one or two more short stories in there just to kind of get you into the game universe. And then there's a section I'm working on called Apocrypha, which is like legends and myths that people tell each other about the Synthicide galaxy. And the whole idea is like everything in the Apocrypha is fantastic and interesting and compelling, but it might not be real. So it's, again, up to the players and the GMs to decide, if this place is real, like, how much does it line up with the story everybody tells? If this hero exists, is he as good of a guy as everybody says he is? Or if this villain is really out there, doing horrible things, like, is he incorrigibly evil, or is he actually not that bad a guy? So, there's a lot of, ambiguity and unknown quantities in the Synthicide universe. So even as I start to expand it, just the idea of making the story expansions myths allows me to kind of maintain that mystery of the universe even as I write more about it. And then in addition to the myths, I'm looking at doing a little bit of, an equipment guide for additional equipment, so people who are gear nuts can have fun with all that. And then maybe adding a chapter about, fantastic creatures, because they're hinted at in the core game, like, oh yeah, there's these monsters that exist around the galaxy that, are weird types of non-sentient beastly aliens. But they're not really well explained, and I think there's only like 5 or 6 pre-made, alien monsters in the book that you can use as an example of, aliens to encounter. So I thought, that might be an area that would be fun, is to make up just a whole bunch of, alien beastly things. But it's still going to go with the same Asimovian feel that there's humans and robots are still the only intelligent life in the galaxy. So, as I do like this Xenolife chapter that I'm going to put in the Galactic Folio, they're all going to be non-intelligent animals that are threatening or important for various reasons.
Very cool. Yeah. Well, first and foremost, sci-fi game. People love aliens, and they love killing aliens, so that's always a plus. And then, I'm of the opinion that everybody loves gear books. Whether they do or not, that's my personal opinion. And in the military, they call people like that geardos, and that's I'm very much a geardo.
Do you have any upcoming cons you'll be playing the game at?
Yeah, I'm running 4 games at Gen Con, and there's a Friday slot and a Saturday slot open. They close for a while, like the tickets sell out, and then for whatever reason, a couple weeks later, one ticket will pop open. So someone will drop out or whatever. But I just checked today, and there's one ticket available for Friday and another ticket available for Saturday.
Saturday, 6 o'clock? Are you running a game called Will Kill for Food?
Yes.
I'll see you there. I already bought my ticket for it.
All right. Awesome. My only one thing I want to get off is you guys made one mistake with the action point system. Part of that, I blame myself for not, it's a bit of information design. I tried to make it as clear as possible, but, maybe I could have made it clearer. The other thing you guys struggled with was the resolve points.
Yes. I thought somebody caught it, but then when I did the edit, I was like, I thought somebody caught that, but after the fact, it was like, well, there's no way to fix it now. But yeah, so please explain what the difference was.
So, when you're running the game as is, it's really gritty and really rough. So the thing that keeps you alive are resolve points. Resolve points are automatic 10s. So you don't spend them to modify your roll up. You actually just spend them in place of a roll and get a 10 on the die. And you need them often to survive fights. Like that fight against those flying robots you guys did at the end. If their intelligence hadn't been tied to the planet and hadn't been hackable, you guys would have died.
I don't know if you noticed or not, but if you watch the video of that, because I recorded it from my perspective, so the GM map is what you see, and if you look up in the top, there was actually 2 walkers that I never ever activated.
Yeah.
Because I was like, oh, wait a minute, I might need to scale this down a little bit.
Yeah.
I thought something looked off.
Dustin, I really appreciate you coming on and talking about your game, and I really do honestly love your game. As a matter of fact, the other guys, we're talking about getting together. Well, we have a con that we're going to be going to in November, and I said, there's no reason why we cannot revisit this game and those characters and just have a side game where we play just us. And I think I speak for everybody that I look forward to doing something like that, because this game is that much fun, and I really do appreciate it.
That's awesome. I'm glad you had such a good time. And let me know how it's going. And if you have any questions or feedback or thoughts, just keep me in the loop.
Dustin, thank you again. Michael, Chris, thank you for joining me, as always. It's always great to see you guys again.
Anytime.
All right. And thank you all for watching.